I call to order the Monday, January 13th, 2020 Scott County Planning Advisory Commission. We'll start with our roll call and introductions.
Commissioner Watson,
Here.
Commissioner Vanoff,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Robbie,
Here.
Commissioner Huber,
Here.
Commissioner Hartman,
Here.
and Commissioner Henches.
Here.
Also in the chambers this evening, we have our Commissioner Tom Wolf and our staff at the end of the podium, Brad Davis, our planning manager. Next to him, Barb Simonson, Deputy Clerk to the Board. Also in the chambers, I see Marty Schmitz, our zoning administrator, Greg Wagner, our senior planner, and Nathan Hall, our associate planner. Our first item of business is the approval of our December 9th, 2019 Planning Advisory Commission meeting minutes. All of the commissioners have had an opportunity to review the minutes. Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions to the minutes as printed?
I'll move to approve,
I have
noting that it was a 10-minute meeting.
I didn't see that. I have a motion to approve by Commissioner Johnson. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
A second by Commissioner Huber. Any other discussion? All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
All abstain?
2 abstentions. Myself and Commissioner Hartman are abstaining. The minutes are approved. Our next item is a public hearing. It's the Legacy Edition. It's a request for rezoning on 29.52 acres from Rural Residential Reserve, RR1, to Rural Residential Single Family, RR2. And the second portion of this public hearing is a request to approve a preliminary plat and a final plat of Legacy Edition consisting of 5 lots on the 29.52 acres. The location is Section 13, Spring Lake Township. The current zoning is Rural Residential 1. And making the staff report this evening is Associate Planner Nathan Hall. Good evening, Mr. Hall.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is located in Section 13 of Spring Lake Township. It's along Revere Avenue and is bordered by Cleary Lake Regional Park on 2 sides. The property contains some productive acreage. It also contains some woodland, wetlands, and it does have a DNR protected wetland in the southeast of the site. The property is currently zoned Rural Residential Reserve and is an outlot in the Cleary Acres First Edition. The applicant is requesting a zone change to Rural Residential Single Family, a preliminary plat and final plat for a 5-lot residential subdivision. The subdivision proposes lots between 5 acres and 6.8 acres with home sites accessed from 3 driveways. It is noted that Revere Avenue is now a paved township roadway. Wetland boundaries were delineated for and submitted to Scott Soil and Water Conservation District and County Natural Resources for review. Notice of decision approved the application for concurrence of wetland boundaries in December of 2019. County regulations require conservation easements over the wetland areas on lots less than 10 acres. These conservation easements will be required to be filed with the final plat. Primary and alternate septic sites have been identified for all 5 lots. The Scott County Environmental Services staff has reviewed the application and found it to be in compliance with the Scott County Septic Ordinance, and staff has noted that Lot 3 will need to gain approval to cross a drainage utility easement to construct the septic sites on the rear of the property. No grading is proposed as part of this plat.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, did you say no grading?
No grading is being proposed as part of the plat. The applicants will have to, each individual lot site will need to apply for a grading permit at the time that they are proposing the construction of the driveway and the home site. It has been proposed that less than 1 acre of land would be disturbed by the future driveways and the home sites. Thereby, that will eliminate the requirement to incorporate stormwater volume control practices into the design. The Scott County Natural Resources Department has reviewed the application and provided this attached memo from December 2019. The Natural Resources Department included a few comments related to items that need to be identified on the plan set, and there have been some changes made already, and that's what you saw on the plans that were shown earlier. Any requirements of the Scott County Natural Resources Department has been placed as a condition to be satisfied prior to county board consideration, as noted on page 4 of the staff report. We did receive a letter from Three Rivers Park District regarding the project. The Park District noted that additional drainage cannot be accommodated within the park. This issue will be addressed through the typical natural resources review process. Spring Lake Township met with the applicant's representative in December and provided this township recommendation. They recommended approval of the request with the condition that all fees are paid and stormwater management plan is reviewed if over the threshold. And that concludes a presentation of the report. I'll stand by for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions at this point? Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Chairman, it says that the tree preservation, wetland issues, and/or review comments by the township are not included. Did they have any comments, the township? I mean, we don't see any, but they didn't have.
I'm sorry, on the township recommendation?
It says, please note, review of any tree preservation, wetland issues, and/or review comments by the township are not included. Did they ever have any?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson, that is the, if I could just, this is referring to the memo from Megan Tasca to Marty Schmitz. Commissioner Johnson, this is a typical comment provided by the water resources engineer that is and we did not have any additional comments from the township regarding these issues.
Mr. Chairman, you did say that there's quite a bit of woodland on, about half woodland on it?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Johnson, there is woodland on the property. There's also wetland and productive acreage. There's a variety of different land uses there.
So, if I may continue, they could go and clear cut a lot if they wanted to, right?
Commissioner Johnson, there would not be a limitation on that. As long as the property is not, they're not intruding into areas surrounding protected lakes or features such as that, there would not be a limitation on the tree removal.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Johnson, with regard to the tree removal, the way the county ordinance is structured, it's structured such that you have to be in a conservation area and then have a certain number of lots. And then the developer is subject to a conservation or a tree removal plan. In this particular case, we don't meet those thresholds. There wasn't a need for a tree preservation plan as part of the submittal of the plat. Now, each individual lot owner will have the ability to do their grading, do their site prep to accommodate their house, their driveway, any accessory buildings, pools they might be able to install there. And they would have the liberty to remove trees if that's what they chose to do. It's very unlikely that somebody would choose to clear cut a wooded lot if that was what they were looking to do, they probably wouldn't buy a wooded lot to start with, because there's definitely a premium there.
Mr. Chair, I agree with Marty. I mean, developers and people going buying lots want to have the trees.
Right.
They're pretty valuable, so I would think most people would try to be careful as much as they can. There'll be some trees that'll have to be removed, and some trees will die from the housing construction, but is it is.
Mr. Chairman, but one time we had protecting Savannah oaks and all that, so we don't have any trees on this property that might be a protected tree, or does that, it still wouldn't apply according to Marty? No? Okay.
Did you want to explain that? And why that would, or when it would apply then?
In order for our tree preservation requirements to kick in, you have to be within a conservation area as delineated in our public values mapping. And this particular plat doesn't fall into those areas. So this plat didn't reach the threshold for needing a tree preservation plan, number one. Number two, the developer isn't cutting any trees down. They're not doing any grading. With the creation of the lots, all the grading will be done as the individual lots develop. So for that reason also, there wasn't a need for a tree preservation plan.
And there's no delineation on what's significant trees and what are scrub trees?
We
until
didn't
you're
ask
in
them to do that as part of the
Right.
plat, and we don't normally require that.
Right. Any other questions? Steph? I just have one question on the three residences off of one driveway there, because I was looking when I first looked at this and saw the challenges with those first two lots. And apparently the township is all right with that, because they approved the development, so they're aware of that, and it's off of their road, and they have to issue the driveway permits, so.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. This is now a township roadway after the turn back, and it is something that they have reviewed.
Okay, that was my only question when I originally looked at this, and then that was my assumption that they were good with it. Okay, that's all I have. Is there any other questions? Okay, thank you. And Mr. Hall, and this is a public hearing, and if anyone from the audience would like to make public comment, they can come up to the podium at this time. And if you come up to the podium, there's a sign-up sheet there that you can just sign in there with your name, and then please start your comments with your name.
Planning Commission, my name is Gary Tupy, and we are assisting the owners on the legacy plat.
Yep.
We're representing them here tonight, and just a couple comments to make everybody feel a little better. If you look at, actually it's lots 5, 4, and 3, it's kind of hard with the shading on the plat, but if you're out there walking that particular site, there really will be, at one time this was gonna come in with a road wandering through with 9 lots on 2.5 acres, and there would have been all kinds of environmental impacts and wetlands being dealt with and some trees taken out. And after examining both plats, obviously the owners felt comfortable coming forward with fewer lots, bigger lots.
Yeah.
Those lots now where the home sites go will have 0 tree removals. So they're all in the open spaces. The trees in the plat really follow the wetland borders because obviously it was farmed for many years and the farmer took as many usable acres as he could. Lot 1 on the north side of the plat is the only lot that will be impacted. The house will fringe into the trees. And I've walked that woods extensively. It's an older woods. There are a few what I'd call heritage trees way to the back on the park line. Most of the rest is kind of dead fallen wood. So really, as far as an environmental impact from the plat, I think you're gonna see really 0,
Yeah.
honestly. So,
So the way it's drawn is specifically looking at the topography and where the trees are at.
correct. The house pads are gonna be very
Makes more sense,
relative to where those houses are gonna go, and they're all on the rolling hills to catch walkouts. So I think from an environmental standpoint, this plat will be pretty close to 0. So, and we were at the town board meeting, and the town board was very supportive. The driveway was not an issue. They felt that that was a private easement arrangement between the owners. They had no problem with that. Actually, they liked fewer culverts better.
Yeah.
And so they gave us a heads up to go preliminary and final plat, so,
Thank you, Gary. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. for
thank
that.
you.
At this time, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
I move we close the public hearing. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Watson, second by Commissioner Hartman. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Public hearing is closed. At this time, I'll entertain a motion on this item before us?
Mr. Chairman, based upon the criteria for approval listed in the staff report, I recommend approval of the rezoning preliminary plat, final plat of Legacy Edition consisting of 5 lots on 29.52 acres, noting that this recommendation is subject to the approval of the conditions listed in the staff report and must be satisfactorily addressed prior to county board consideration of the project. Also note that Spring Lake Township has approved.
A second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Watson, second by Commissioner Huber. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. It has been approved. Thank you very much. Mr. Hartman, or Mr. Hall, and Mr. Kupi. Our next item of business this evening is, I believe it's the election of officers. And we're going to be doing the planning commission ones this evening. Is that correct? Okay. Okay. So the process we will be following is the one that we've been following for open nominations. For anyone to nominate for the chair. And at that point, I'll look for nominations and then we'll vote on them.
I'll nominate Tom Von Hoff for chair.
Okay?
I'll second it.
Okay. We have a nomination for Tom Von Hoff. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. I have a motion. Motion to close the nominations
Mr.
first
Chair, I make a motion, we close the nominations.
for chair. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Hartman. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, go Barb.
Second by Commissioner Johnson. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Nominations are closed. And then we'll have a vote. I'll call for a vote on the chair of the Planning Advisory Commission for Tom Von Hoff for 2020. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. The new chair for the Planning Advisory Commission for 2020 will be Tom Von Hoff, and the vote count was unanimous.
Okay, but we should change it to 2020, not 2018.
Did I say 2020, yes. Okay, and the next item we have is the vice chair of the Planning Advisory Commission. I'll open nominations at this time.
I'll nominate Barb Johnson.
We have a nomination for Barb Johnson.
I'll second
Johnson
that.
for- And I have a second, a nomination and a second for Barb Johnson. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll make a motion, or I'll ask for a motion to close the nominations.
I so move to close nominations.
I'll second that.
Have Commissioner Robbie and Commissioner Hartman seconding to close the nominations. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Nominations are closed. We will now vote on nominations for Vice Chair of the Planning Advisory Commission for 2020 as Barb Johnson. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Barb Johnson will be the Vice Chair of the Planning Advisory Commission for 2020, and the vote count was unanimous. We will now open nominations for Secretary of the Planning Advisory Commission for 2020.
And that's
Question.
Barb, right?
Yes,
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
yes.
Who was the secretary of the planning commission?
It's Lee.
Barb.
Barb.
Lee.
Lee is.
Yeah.
Oh, is-
Barb is in the Board of Adjustments.
Oh, I thought it was.
Board of Adjustment of the Planning Commission.
Oh, thank you for the clarification. Lee?
Did you know you were
Watson.
secretary?
Okay.
Know that, huh?
Thank you for that clarification.
Good question.
Yes, that was a great question. So, current chair, or the current Secretary of the Planning Advisory Commission for 2019 was Lee Watson. So, I will, at this time, ask for nominations for 2020 for Secretary of Planning Advisory Commission.
I'll nominate Lee Watson.
Nomination by Commissioner
will
Johnson. Do I have a second? Second by
I'll second.
Commissioner Henches. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to close the nominations.
I'll move to close.
Motion by Commissioner Johnson, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Henches. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
I will now call for a vote on the nomination for the Secretary of Plan Advisory Commission for 2020 as Lee Watson, Commissioner Lee Watson. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. The Secretary of Planning Advisory Commission for 2020 will be Commissioner Lee Watson, and the vote count is unanimous. Thank you very much. I'll now call for a motion to adjourn.
Hold on, I have an update first.
Oh, I skipped ahead. Went too fast. Yes. We'll go down to the planning manager's report. Mr. Davis.
All right, since our last meeting, the county board took up a couple of items at their December 17th meeting. They approved the preliminary and final plat of Delmar Estates. That was Randy and Chris Kubish, Glenn and Dwayne Bauer, the property owners. That created 5 lots and 1 outlot in Section 5 of Helena Township. They also approved the rezone of 62 acres from Urban Expansion Reserve to Urban Expansion Reserve Cluster for Leroy Chard, Section 32 of St. Lawrence Township. There's a handout that I'm going to be sharing with the town boards this month when we meet, and I wanted to provide the information to you as well. This shows the number of lots that were final platted by township, going all the way back to 2001 up through end of year 2019 on one side. And on the other side is the number of new homes, single-family homes that were built by township for that same time period. For the new homes, 84 new single-family homes were permitted across the 11 townships. 84 is about on track with what was approved going back to 2018, 2017. You'll note that there was a dip in housing development during the Great Recession. And then when you go farther back into the 2000s, if you were on the Planning Commission, you knew just what kind of housing boom we had in the rural area when we were pulling a couple hundred permits, or issuing a couple hundred permits a year. Still pretty steady. I think the other page that shows the number of new lots will suggest that we'll continue to see probably homes going up in those new lots. Tonight, you just preliminary approved 5 more lots. When you look at the final lots platted, 95 new lots were created. Most of those are residential lots. There may be a couple of those lots are commercial lots, but most of these are residential. You have to go back to about 2005, 2006 before you see these higher numbers of new lots platted. For a lot of years, we were down in the single digits. Bumped up again a couple of years ago when we created 77 lots. Now we're up to 95 lots. Again, we're hearing interest from landowners that will likely continue to want to come in this year in 2020 and plat. We're hearing about a couple of development interests. So we believe that we'll continue to have high numbers. Whether we'll hit 90 again in 2020 is hard to predict. So that's total numbers. I think by township, there's a couple of notable things. Most of the new lots platted, both last year and when you look across all the past 2 decades, most of those lots were created by design in the 4 eastern townships. Those are the townships that are guided for 2.5 acre density, where we've done a lot of planning for that type of development. So by design, that's where we've seen most of the platting interest. And then last year, you see that Credit River had 45 final lots platted. Spring Lake was the 34. Also by design, not a lot of plat creation in some of the townships more slated for urban expansion long-term. So those are places like Jackson and Sand Creek. Part of Sand Creek and part of Louisville. Also, not a lot of platting in some of our townships that are really geared towards long-term farmland preservation. Those, you can see over the last few years, there may be 5, 6 lots created each year in those townships.
Right. Mr. Chair, Brad, I'm assuming like Helena Township, that's the outskirts of New Prague, the edge of New Prague?
Yeah, so when you look at the new homes built, Helena Township was a notable uptick. I think they had 15 new homes going up. I think a lot of those were around the lake, either around Cedar Lake or the other lake is escaping me. Does someone help me on lake? It's another lake that there was a couple of plats in a small subdivision that went in about a year and a half ago that we're probably seeing homes go up now. And then maybe just some lots too outside of New Prague.
That Silver Maple Bay or whatever it is, had, I think, had a couple.
Maybe one or two, and on the other side of the lake, on the southeast side of the lake, I think there was a development. Grandview Arbor.
Another question, St. Lawrence Township, I mean, there's been nothing.
Ever.
Forever, before 2001.
Yeah.
Build some homes back.
Most
in
of the land area is
2001.
either zone ag or urban expansion, so there's not a lot of ability to plat below 40 acres. So we're probably seeing that reflected in those numbers a little bit.
Brad,
Lakely's about the same.
as far as the trend here, back in the middle 2000s, we had 240, 260 homes. We're averaging now probably around, I don't know, 80, 70. About 40% it was years back. Do you have a sense why that is? People not wanting to come out this far for development? I mean, to build a home and that, people going more into the inner city? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. I think it is that. I think people are less interested in moving too far away from where they need to be every day with their jobs or schools or elsewhere that they need to run to. I think some of the homes that were built out there may have been in a market that people just aren't ready to move up to yet in today's housing market. And so they're not looking for that risk of taking on more of a higher home price to move out into the country and build out there. Those are probably the two things that I hear about talking to.
And most of the houses out in the, basically out in the townships are pretty high-end homes.
Yeah.
You know, $500,000 plus up
500,000, yeah.
at a minimum. Okay, thank you.
That's all I have for the update. Just to remind everyone that we'll have a workshop after you adjourn. We'll meet next door in the conference room. We have some updates, more updates to discuss on the zoning ordinance. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that too with us on the trends. It's instructive when we can see what's happening over time. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, if there's not anything else for the cause at this time, we will adjourn. I'd like a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion, we adjourn.
Motion by Commissioner Hartman. Second by Commissioner Huber. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
We will adjourn and move into the adjoining chambers for our ordinance workshop.